All statements and opinions expressed by guests of the Adult in the Room podcast are strictly their own and do not necessarily reflect the beliefs or opinions of the host, producers, or advertisers. All interviews are presented in their most complete possible form in the interests of free speech. No statements should be interpreted as financial, legal, or medical advice. Listener and viewer discretion are strongly advised.
It's the Adult in the Room podcast with Victoria Taft. That's me.
Well, greetings to you, Victoria Taft, the Adult in the Room podcast, coming to you from the station Seattle Red in Seattle, you might expect, and red meaning that it's a conservative station, formerly known as 770 KTTH. So I'm filling in for Jason Rantz this afternoon again, and so that's what I'm doing here. All right, so better lighting this time. Lots to talk about, as Janet Jackson once said, lots to talk about. And there is, because we found out that overnight, President Trump planned to designate Antifa a terrorist organization. And we're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about how the left is weaponizing the messages about the assassin in the Charlie Kirk murder against the right, or at least attempting to do that, and the amazing physical gymnastics they have to do. I mean, it's just unbelievable. I mean, it's crazy. Also, what's going on in Capitol Hill, and why is it that these guys who are now in the minority, that would be the likes of the Democrats, are giving Kash Patel such a hard time in their hearings, and how Kash Patel really felt like it was, okay, I'm just going to lay it all out there. I'm just going to give it to you guys all right back. And he did. And I don't know whether to cheer or be appalled. I think I'm going to cheer. And with two guests this hour on the Adult in the Room podcast, we're going to talk to Ryan Mauro, who has just come out with a study of all of the ways, an investigative study of all the ways that the Soros Foundation has been seeding money, giving money to groups that are violent. And even though you may love George Soros, personally, not me, but if you may love him, you have to admit you cannot get government subsidized funds, i.e. tax written off, 501c4s and that sort of thing, if you underwrite violent protest. Apparently, that's a bozo no-no. And so we're going to talk about that with Ryan Mauro. And also, we will talk to Seamus Bruner. He's the director of research. Got a couple of researchers today. And he's with the Government Accountability Institute. And that is Peter Schweitzer's outfit. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of the connections between the far, far left and the man who took out Charlie Kirk. So let's get started, because this happens to be one of the things I am most interested in, and that is the Antifa connection with all of this. Of course, now when this came to pass and Charlie's life was ended, what happened was we found out in some of the Discord groups, the text messages or the messages, maybe they weren't text per se, but they were messages that on the Discord group, there were some people who knew in advance, apparently, reportedly, that this was going to go down the day it did, when Charlie Kirk was in Utah, and he was on the campus there at Utah Valley University. And they had been told, they were forewarned, and then our killer came back and said, I'm sorry, guys, it was me, and I'm sorry, because I'm going to bring so much heat on you guys. And indeed, they're all under investigation, apparently, now. But there were other sort of outside groups. There were weird, like the queer shooting group. You know, there's the Pink Pistols groups that are around the country. This is, gay and lesbian gun groups that have one sole issue that they deal with, and that is gun use and Second Amendment rights. And so those guys, they're not in any way, shape, or form coming to under pressure because of this. It's the other one that split off from the Salt Lake City group that is under scrutiny now. And so we've got lots of symbology and lots of things that go along with this group that apparently was alluded to by the douchebag who did this. So and I don't even want to remember his name. Honestly, I don't want to mention his name. I think I'm disgusted with this dude. And not I think, I am. And the sooner I can stop talking about him, the better. But I'm not going to do it in lieu of telling you what the truth is. Okay, I'm always going to tell you the truth. And I think there are lots of tentacles to the far left here. And whether or not they were like going to membership meetings, I don't know. I mean, doubtful. But I think that this person was radicalized online, as so many jihadists are in the Islamist supremacy movement and now in the leftist supremacy movement. I think that's where they share their viewpoints. For the left, this Antifa, oh, we're anti-fascists, we're going to go punch a Nazi. Anyone who does not agree with their worldview, and it could be any small itsy-bitsy permutation, is considered to be, with which they disagree. It could be considered to be a Nazi, somebody worthy of being punched. So when you hear the left talking about go out and punch somebody, and these are leaders, congressional representatives, who are on the record as saying they want you to go out and create a crowd. And what has that gained for them? A body count, right? They've done this in service, the Antifa people. I'm not saying that the shooter person was involved in Antifa, but he certainly was inspired and he was influenced by that far left, reckless belief system, a religion of the left. This is what happens when people turn away from God and they adopt anything else as the replacement for order. And like, well, this is why this is, the world is this way. Why is the world this way? Well, because the left says it's, here, every jot and tittle here. And the man has to go. You have no reason to aspire to anything better. Nothing will get better. You have to go out and punch your way through life instead of going out on your own merit and succeeding. See, this shooter person was brought up in both camps, and he decided to adopt the wrong side. And he apparently found himself, he discovered, well, I'm gay. And he moved out of the house and he moved in. What does he move in with? A person who describes himself as a furry and is in the furry community. And did I ever tell you about the time that an Oregon congressional representative was discovered to be in the furry community? It's a generally left-wing fetish group of people, subgroup, weirdos. And they sort of emerge from, you always see them at don't be confused with people who go to Comic-Con. Some people might be in the furry community, but it is really off-putting. For example, when you go to, I went to a big market in Seattle recently, and I was met with an entire entourage. I took pictures of them. I should have put one in here, but I didn't think I was going to go off on this tangent. But it was just like these people dressed up as animals with tails and and I'm not talking the Japanese stuff. I'm not talking that. We're cute, whatever. No, we're talking about like furries. And I just thought, this is weird. Don't you have parents? Anyway, so this guy, his boyfriend was in this furry community. And his boyfriend was also in the Transtifa, or the trans movement, because he decided, the boyfriend did, that, I don't want to be a boy anymore. I'd like to dress up as a girl, which he did. And so apparently the shooter got together with him. And as we pointed out in our last live stream, the ally of the trans community, which was our shooter, decided to go overboard with his support and shoot somebody with whom he disagreed about loving thy body, loving your own body the way it is, instead of trying to make it into something that it was never meant to be, nor will it ever be. So therein lies the rub. We have these two differences of opinion. And it's an important thing. It's an important distinction. So Jimmy Kimmel, he's now in trouble. He's apparently lost his job, or he's temporarily suspended, or people are cleaning out their offices. ABC decided to get rid of him because 30 stations said, you know, when you go on the air and you say something that is going to inflame half the country, and you'll see what it is in a second, and is untrue, we're not going to play that show. We actually are going to black it out and put something else in. So here's what Jimmy Kimmel did and said, listen.
New lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them, and doing everything they can to score political points from it.
Okay, so as we have all figured out, the person, and in fact, we figured it out, the sheriff has pointed out, the governor has pointed out, and other spokespersons for the information coming out in this investigation, that the shooter is a person who's a trans ally. And the shooter did it because he hated Charlie Kirk. And I have to tell you, I have never seen, no, I can't say that, almost as bad as when I said something, it wasn't even against Ukraine, but it was something that wasn't, I spelled Kyiv wrong. And they had my head. I've never had so many bots come onto the Victoria Taft Show Facebook page. I've never seen that many. It was insane. And so when I put up a comment from this live stream a couple of weeks or a couple of days ago, saying that Charlie Kirk represented not just political viewpoints, but also represented the fact that God exists, God is good, Jesus died for your sins, they had a meltdown. He was not a Christian. He was terrible, etc., etc. And the reason I stopped the soundbite where I did was because it's not even true. What Jimmy Kimmel went on and said Monday night is not true. We have all been told before he went on the air on Monday, before he pre-recorded his show, which he does, he knew that this individual was radicalized on the left, was a trans ally, had marked his bullets with sayings and emoticons and other things having to do with these games on Discord, as well as Antifa callbacks. And he lied about it. So here's Jimmy Kimmel continuing the lie.
Between the finger pointing, there was grieving. On Friday, the White House flew the flags at half-staff, which got some criticism. But on a human level...
Wait, got some criticism from a school district or two. Okay.
You can see how hard the president is taking this.
Now, before we play this, I need you to know something. Jimmy Kimmel even lied about this. So he flips over to the president of the United States, talking about, he was trying to get out of a gaggle. He had spent many minutes talking about Charlie Kirk before he got on Marine One to go to Air Force One to go to the UK. And he did this and was trying to get out of there. But here's what Jimmy Kimmel played.
My condolences on the loss of your friend Charlie Kirk. May I ask, sir, personally, how are you holding up over the last day and a half, sir?
I think very good. And by the way, right there, you see all the trucks? They've just started construction of the new ballroom for the White House, which is something they've been trying to get, as you know, for about 150 years. And it's going to be a beauty.
Yes. He's at the fourth stage of grief, construction.
Now, that's a funny joke. That's actually a funny joke. Very seldom does that occur for Jimmy Kimmel, and it probably won't happen anymore because he's gotten his show yanked off the air, because even people who maybe have laughed at his jokes over a period of time decided that, this guy's not funny anymore. And by the way, at a fraught time like this, when the divisions are so huge, how in heaven's name do you go on the air and pour gasoline on it? I'll never forget. I was in Southern California. It was after the 92. I was on the air, believe it or not. I've been around a while. They call me the adult in the room, not the child in the room. And it was on the Rodney King case. And I was going to do a special talk show after the verdict of the second trial. And they said, please, just please don't, chill out. Don't say anything that will exacerbate either which way. Just talk about the case, talk about the trial, talk about the verdict. That's it. Because they announced it. Because it turns out in Los Angeles, or Simi Valley as the case may be, what you don't do is you don't announce a verdict going into a weekend on an evening. Don't do that. We found that out. Don't do that. Do it on a Saturday. So I came in on Saturday and did it. So, but here's the way it was for Trump. Here's part of it. Okay. Here's part of what he really said.
Total
okay?
animal. And hopefully they'll have him and they'll get him. What he did is disgraceful. Charlie Kirk was a great person, a great man, great in every way, especially with youth. And what this man did was disgraceful. So hopefully we'll have him and we will deal with him very appropriately.
My condolences to you, sir.
So that's an upcut.
Your friend Charlie Kirk. May I ask, sir?
That's an upcut. And this is after multiple questions about Charlie Kirk. This is multiple questions. And then over here on the second bracket here of this soundbite, which I apparently didn't get. I thought I did, but whatever. It's another tranche of questions about Charlie Kirk and the president responding to the questions. And he's talking about how he's going to go to the funeral and how, it doesn't matter when it's going to be. This is before he went to the UK. So this is before he knew for sure if it was going to be next weekend. He says, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. I will go. I will be there. I have an obligation to be there. He's a friend of mine, blah, blah, blah. And so what does Jimmy Kimmel do? Jimmy Kimmel puts the part about where he's talking about the ballroom, which, it was an inartful segue. It didn't make it wrong, though. It was inartful, fine. But it wasn't the president just going, oh, I don't want to answer that question. I'm just going to go and talk about something else. No. So not only did he lie about the nature of the background of the shooter, and after knowing what the nature of the shooter was, he went on the air and also lied, about what the president said, okay, and how he said it and when he said it. I understand that some people do that for laughs, but at a time like this, when you've just lied about something, do you really compound the lie with another lie? Is that really what we want to do? I mean, honestly, here, I'm going to have another drink of my Celsius. It's dangerous. It's been a long day, but it's got lots of caffeine in it. Ooh. Okay. So that's the name of that tune. That's what happened here. And I got to tell you, it's not okay. It's not okay. And he deserved to get whatever he got. And apparently he got fired. And I'll tell you why he got fired. This is according to Charles Gasparino. So Charlie Gasparino over at the New York Post is a business reporter. And he goes, look, there is a huge attempt to sell these stations. Merge the stations. And he goes, I don't know what they're thinking. I don't know what they're thinking. They wanted to make sure that they had a very easy transition in this merger before the FCC. And what does Kimmel do? He just blew it up, or he tried to. And so Gasparino's going, that's why everybody at Disney, the parent company, Sinclair Broadcasting, and Nexstar, Sinclair and Nexstar own 60 stations together, 60. And they said, no, we're pulling him off our air. We're pulling Kimmel off. So that's and they had to save themselves, and they didn't want to piss anybody off at the FCC. So that's why they did that. Okay, so moving right along here, I wanted to, before we get to our guest, I haven't seen him yet, so I imagine I'm probably going to have to make sure I see if he's checked in. But as far as Antifa is concerned, I wrote a piece last night on PJ Media about what this means. The Trump to Antifa, It's Going Down is the name of the story that I wrote, and here is the picture that you look for in order to find it. This is a picture of Keith Ellison. Keith Ellison, the person in the spot next to him to his right, was a guy by the name of Luis, who is one of Portland, Rose City Antifa's biggest saboteurs, provocateurs, and violent activists and direct action people. And he had Keith Ellison, then I think a congressman, hold up the book, and they got their pictures taken together. Somewhere in my computer library, I have a picture of them, both of them here. But now Keith Ellison, who's Keith Ellison? Keith Ellison is the Attorney General of Minnesota. He's the one who, when we talked about the other day, when we talked about all the different lies about the Michael Brown case, the lies about the situation, Derek Chauvin in Minneapolis, where we found out that, his knee wasn't actually on George Floyd's neck, and what happened as a result of that. This is the guy who made sure that the case came quickly. He got together all these white shoe lawyer firms. They all came in and overwhelmed the system and got the judge to take the case, and nobody refused change of venue and refused to forestall it for any significant period of time. Now the guy, that's his job. He's still there as the chief law enforcement officer in the state of Minnesota. And a great shame to that state's, what a bunch of, why? Oh, well, you did it yourself. You did it to yourself. Well, here we go. There's one thing that I wrote that I wanted to make sure that you heard about, and that was the Antifa story. It's going down. I mentioned it. A couple of things I want you to know about this story. The president says that he is going to designate Antifa a domestic terrorist organization. He said Antifa, a sick, dangerous, radical left disaster, is going to be named a major terrorist organization. I will be strongly recommending, he writes on Truth Social the other night, I guess last night actually. I will also strongly recommend that those funding Antifa be thoroughly investigated in accordance with the highest standard and practices. Thank you for your attention to this matter, he wrote. Okay, the riots by Rose City Antifa were so calamitous in 2020, and from really the inception of the latest iteration of Antifa in Portland, they were so calamitous that they did untold hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars of damage. There was damage to reputation of the city of Portland. There was a recent sale of a downtown, it used to be the place to be. They called it the Big Pink Tower in downtown Portland. And it went up for sale and it was sold for pennies on the dollar. Pennies on the dollar. Why? Because of the Antifa risk in the city of Portland. Okay? That's how crazy this is. And so they've done an untold amount of damage. And the other thing that they have done is in Minneapolis, in Seattle with the autonomous zones, Chaz and Chop, in Cop City, Atlanta. There are other iterations of Antifa. There was the San Diego County iteration of Antifa. And you might think to yourself, well, gee, how do you do that? How do you designate American citizens as part of a terrorist organization? And they're citizens and they have rights and obviously they have freedom of speech. Well, you don't have the freedom of speech to be violent, okay? And you don't have to allow these people to go unmolested in their pursuit of violence. And those two things ought to turn the tide. But, I was talking to, no, I wasn't, because I keep trying to get Andy No on the program, but he's like, I'm in the UK, I can't talk to you. So, but I did watch a live stream that he did last night. And one of the things that he said, which I found, okay, that's probably true. He goes, you can't really outlaw groups because we do have freedom of association, obviously. But what you can do, you have to show that there's currently the way the terrorism laws read, you have to show that there is an international nexus between these groups and an international group. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to Ryan Mauro. And Ryan Mauro recently wrote, yesterday, just released it, and I've read most of it. It was a 95-page report on the connections between George Soros' money and different violent organizations that have brought violence to college campuses and in the United States in Antifa, at least in Atlanta, Georgia, when they did Stop Cop City. That was an Antifa-run op. And let's see, I excerpted it in my story because I wanted to make sure I could read it to you on this live stream today. So Wednesday, Ryan releases his report, and he said that there's an alliance that is funded by George Soros with all of these Soros millions and stuff. It's called the Grassroots Global Justice Alliance, which has ties to Hamas and the Union of Palestinian Women's Committees, and help support the Antifa group Stop Cop City. So when Ryan comes on in just a couple of minutes, I'm going to ask him if that could be the nexus of the international support for Antifa in the United States, which could trigger the material support for terrorism activities by George Soros to Stop Cop City. A lot of those people at the Stop Cop City thing have been rolled up by the feds, and they're in big trouble. I mean, they are. Recently, in 2021, there were a bunch of Antifa folks rolled up. Initially, I thought they were going to invoke the racketeering statutes, and I thought they started out doing that. But ultimately, what they were sentenced for were individual crimes that the people did, which were bad enough because they were beating the snot out of people in Pacific Beach. Like on a beach I go walking on with regularity. And it was shocking because stuff like that never happens in PB. And I was surprised to see that it happened. But yet these people were having a support Donald Trump rally or some free speech rally. And of course, Antifa came along and they said, oh yeah, you want a free speech rally? Well, you're going to have to go through us. And they beat the snot out of these people. And so I think people went to the hospital. It was ugly. And so in 2023, these guys began getting their just desserts. Everything went on trial. And then, so that happened. So we've got the prosecutions at Stop Cop City. We've got the Antifa in San Diego County. And they got an assist from LA County. There were LA County Antifa people coming. And indeed, that Stop Cop City, there were people from, if memory serves, Rose City Antifa at Stop Cop City. So you do have a nexus with the Soros money. And I'm going to ask Ryan Mauro. We'll see how it goes. But I think that's the nexus. And let me tell you something else. Take heart. Just take heart. Because years ago, I remember I spent a lot of my time through my career in San Diego, in Portland, sometimes I'm in Seattle, like today I'm in Seattle. And I live all up and down the coast, family all up and down the coast, friends and stuff. And the biggest shock I ever had, and one of the biggest frustrations I ever had, was waiting for the feds to do something about the Earth Liberation Front and the Animal Liberation Front. Okay. And those two entities were bombing stuff. There was an unfinished, under construction condo complex in San Diego County, and they burned it. These are the people, ELF and indeed ALF, it turns out, burned the Vail ski resort down. I mean, these people were evil. They let animals out of labs. They just freed them, mink. They went to the University of Washington and ruined the horticulture school. I mean, they said, well, we've got to do something. People unthinking, just dumb, unthinking. We've got to do something. We're going to take direct action. And it was just like these people. I mean, in Portland, which is where I was living through part of this, I remember, the guy sitting, Craig Rosenbra or whatever his name is, sitting on a ledge on a downtown Portland building for days. And nobody doing anything about it. Like, dude, get down. He was pooping. He was, he was just disgusting. Okay. And that's what he was doing. And people were like, hey, man, what are you doing about this guy? Well, he was one of them, too. And he was their spokesman. Oh, I'm not part of them. Not me. I just speak for them. And so he'd come out. And he worked, didn't he work for the Red and Black Cafe, which went out of business after a while? I'll never forget one time as a talk show host there, the Red and Black Cafe denied a cup of coffee to a police officer, Portland police officer. Of course they did. It's a socialist collective. They eventually went out of business because it turns out in socialism, eventually you run out of other people's money to pay for your food. Surprise! And they denied a cup of coffee. And so I had somebody, it actually turned out to be a friend of mine. And he eventually became a friend of mine. And he donated the coffee. And we set up tables and we gave cups. We invited all the police officers to come get a cup of coffee in front of the Red and Black before they opened, of course, and get themselves a cup of coffee. And it was glorious. Nevertheless, so ELF and ALF, turns out, as we found out during an FBI investigation, let's see, what was it called? Operation Backfire? Operation Backfire. It took them years to roll these guys up. It took them years. And they were international. And they were doing it from a little burg, a little commune in like Eugene, Oregon, Eugene, Oregon. And together, ELF and ALF were the same people. So the feds called them the family. And the last one was prosecuted and was sentenced in 2006. And there's one person still outstanding, and she did a bunk and escaped to England. But it can be done. So even if they do not succeed, for example, in getting the ability to use a designation of domestic terrorism against Antifa, though I think they richly deserve it, they can still roll them up. And indeed, they have been doing that outside ICE headquarters. They have arrested 26 people. And I think what's interesting about it is that they have done so, and Portland would never have done that. And so I applaud them. Actually, I applaud them. Well, I see Ryan Mauro is waiting at our waiting room. He's an investigative researcher with the Capital Research Center, which is an American investigative think tank. Hey, Ryan, thanks so much for coming on the Adult in the Room podcast. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Our last guest, I don't know where I happened to him, but I'm so pleased to be able to speak with you. Now, here's something I'm just going to ask right out of the chute. How many tentacles do you see between the Soros empire, the millions in the Soros empire, and street thugs in the Pacific Northwest, on the West Coast? Do you see any nexus there?
So the way it seems to work is that the money comes from Soros. And then, by the way, people donate to his foundation as well. So it's not just his money. He collects other people's money, and then they redistribute it to these nonprofit organizations in the United States and elsewhere. And then they do what they're going to do to build what I would call an ecosystem of hate. They don't necessarily have to, although in some cases they do, train and create the militants themselves. They just need to create the environment, the factory, and then they know that's what's going to result. So in terms of tentacles, that's kind of like the assembly line of how that happens. But I mean, there's obviously many, many, many organizations that are funded by Soros, not even including his buddies.
Oh, now you issued a 95-page report yesterday connecting the Soros organization to groups, not legit groups. These are groups that actually foment violence on the street. And you did that. And one of the reasons I wanted to talk with you, especially today, was that following the designation of Antifa as a domestic terrorism organization by President Trump, or at least his intent to do that, I went through your report and I found that there's some connective tissue between the Atlanta, Georgia Stop Cop City and jihadi groups and Hamas-friendly groups. So an international fund, if you will, connected to that organization. Now, some of the people from Rose City Antifa went down for Stop Cop City, as I recall. And in order to be able to roll up these guys as domestic terrorists, one must have some connective tissue to an international connection, something. And I'm just kind of wondering if that would be the connection we're looking for, to use as an excuse, if you will, to get these bastards for being domestic terrorists.
The way you're thinking is absolutely correct. And it's usually a concept that's too sophisticated for me to go into media because it's too hard to grasp. But here's kind of how it's working. The foreign governments and foreign organizations, like Muslim Brotherhood and all of them, but also Russia, China, all of them, they stir up, think in terms of like a beehive and an ecosystem. So they sometimes directly support these groups, but they prefer not to. It's more effective to build the ecosystem. And what they've said, and they say this publicly all the time, is that the objective is to make Americans destroy each other and destroy America. So they don't care. So they support all the ideologies. It's like, to some extent, this far left, far right debate is a waste of time, because I'll tell you, when I monitor how these guys operate digitally, it's all in one box. And the rest of us, anyone who's well-meaning, Democrat, Republican, are on the other side. That's the framing. And so the foreign governments are doing everything that they can, foreign entities, to push the broader ecosystem and then fund some of these nonprofits. So that's the overseas connection. But the infrastructure of what I call the seditionist movement in the United States, that's like the nonprofit network, the people delete, those are the overt ones. And then they give money to other organizations that then get closer to the militants on the ground, who you want to be as independent as possible so you have plausible deniability. So that's the trickle down. It's like trickle down extremism.
You start your report out, which is at capitalresearch.org, and you can find it. I've tweeted it out. Ryan has tweeted it out, and I'll do it again. And I shared it in my story on PJ Media today. And it starts out, since 2016, George Soros' Open Society Foundations, now run with his son Alexander, have poured over $80 million into groups tied to terrorism or extremist violence. Now, I pay attention to Antifa because I'm on the West Coast, and that's where we see 90% of the Antifa activity. And I will tell you that Antifa started becoming allies with BLM in late 2015, 2016. And that's when my friend, an independent reporter, got beaten up and then got prosecuted for pulling a gun in self-defense against Antifa at a BLM event. That's a couple of years before Andy No got beaten, although he'd been roughed up a few times by, guess who? Antifa. Would you look into that? I mean, I'd like to know if there is anything going on there. Since 2016, that's when this started, Ryan.
Yeah, so there are some great researchers. I'm thinking of one friend of mine in particular that like to trace it all the way back to the 60s, and you can. I mean,
sure,
there's
I'm sure you can.
all the way, so it's hard to say exactly when it began, but the escalation that you pointed out, that is correct timing. And so there's these inflection points where these groups started working together more and more and more. But what happened after October 7th was that they actually became one thing. And so you can go to like an Islamist, like especially on the encrypted chats, you can go to an Islamist pro-Hamas one and you'll see Antifa there. Before it used to be like allies just here and there. It's merged now. This is one threat. And believe it or not, you'll see, and it cracks me up every time I see this, you'll see the white supremacists and QAnon types and those interacting with the Islamist extremists, and the propaganda literally being passed from, like, it'll go from an Islamist to the, what they call the far right. I hate that term. And then you'll see it going back from them to the Islamists to the far left. And you see exactly how it's all just one thing. And it's astonishing. So, yeah, I mean, I'll look into certainly anything that you mentioned, but you're exactly right that what's happening is that, and it's probably partially because of the funders, the nonprofit organizations like Soros, they give money to all of these so-called social justice causes. And some of them are legitimate. And I'll explain why that's so important to understand strategically. Mm-hmm. So the ones that we're talking about, they give a lot of the money to these different groups, and therefore there's a common nexus, and therefore over time they morph and morph and morph until we get what we have now, which is the seditionist movement. But the legitimate ones, the reality is evil people still do good things. So I don't think it's like they can genuinely want to give to veterans, but also want to kill Christians. Like that's the type of people are. But strategically, let's say we shut down Soros. A minority of the money goes to extremists. It doesn't seem like all of it, or majority. Mm-hmm. And so what's going to happen? You're going to see across newspapers, across America, pictures of people suffering because nonprofits that do legitimate charitable work and rely on his money got shut down. They don't have his money anymore. That's how they're going to fight this. And to be honest with you, as somebody with empathy, I do feel bad about that. I want to shut down Soros, but it does hurt me when I think about if we shut him down, there are legitimate causes that his money goes to, and those people are going to hurt.
Why doesn't he just give money to legitimate causes? And why doesn't he just give money to legitimate causes and not to the riffraff and the violent people? Is there? Yeah, well, that's why I want to shut question? Him down.
Yeah, that's why I want to obviously shut him down. But there are charities that do good work that they get money from some of these bad places, and then they hurt when you shut down those bad places. So politically, those are going to be the ones that fight back. It's not so much the groups you target. It's even the ones that depend on them and can say, look at how much suffering you caused. Couldn't you have just looked the other way?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see that going on in Gaza, actually. I don't know if that has anything to do with Soros money or anything, but
that's exactly right. Exactly.
Did you find any nexus there with your investigation? Yeah. Tell me about that.
Yeah, let me see. I might even see if I have it right here. So, it's like, well, there was at least 100,000 that went to Al Jazeera from Soros. So that was to work on documentary making, because you want to make a documentary, who do you go to? Al Jazeera.
Sure. When you want the truth.
Right. They do good voiceovers, I'm sure. The one group that it looks like he gave $1.2 million to since 2016, the Al-Mizan Center for Human Rights, that is based in Gaza and supports Hamas and has members directly linked to Hamas, and then Popular Front for Liberation of Palestine, which is the Marxist counterpart to Hamas. They work in tandem. One is hyper-religious Islamist, the other one is Marxist. Iran backs both of them, by the way. So that just shows you the crossover here when you have the Islamic theocracy of Iran backs atheist communists as long as they work with Hamas.
Huh. That's it's mind-blowing. I mean, I've heard about this kind of thing. I mean, the nexus between the left and Islamists. I know it exists. Annie McCarthy wrote a book about it years ago. I recognize that's a thing. I just wonder how one goes about defeating them. And I guess that part of that is the transparency that you've brought in your study. What else can you tell us about what you found out?
Sure. Well, aside from the fact that it's over $80 million going to 54 groups based on Soros's own record, so like nobody can argue with this. What I found was of that over $80 million going to groups engaged in domestic terrorism, crime, and pro-terrorism advocacy, over 23 million of it went to at least 7 groups who are quite openly involved in domestic terrorism and crime on American soil. That's a linchpin. And so people say that this is going to be tough to defeat. I don't think it is. I don't think it, I think if we got everyone on the same page that knew some of the tricks that, honestly, that I've used in my own intelligence work in the past, that I've done, because I've reported thousands of extremists to law enforcement. So I've learned some angles. We could beat this very rapidly.
Really?
I did. Yes.
What terrorist activities have they been involved in? Can you tell us?
Sure. A lot of it is the rioting and things like that. So the money went to, like $400,000 since 2020 went to the Center for Third World Organizing, that brags about how they, and there's a quote, threw down with people in the streets during the uprising after George Floyd passed away in 2020, and says we trained thousands, supported over 100 organizations in 2020, 2021, and taught them, quote, new tactics for actions during lockdown. There's no wiggle room here. The first logical step, I think the designating of Antifa as a terrorist group, I'm going to welcome any step. Let's do the easy stuff first, the most powerful stuff. Let's revoke their tax-exempt statuses. And if there's a elongated process to do that, which, when you read the IRS code, that shouldn't be, but if there's some legal thing that'll delay it, like some people say, change it, pass a law. In today's environment, that'll pass in 24 hours, because you can't have a situation where you can't have an elongated situation where you go to revoke a charity's tax-exempt status, and then it takes so long that they just register a new one in the meantime, and everything goes uninterrupted. You can't have that. But according to the IRS code, you cannot engage in or try to make happen any type of criminal activity. It's supposed to go away like that. And if we do that, according to what the extremists say themselves, I quote from Truth Out, which is a radical, you know them. So Antifa,
sure.
Connected Code Pink and all of them, they wrote this panicked article. I love it. I want to get the exact quote here. where they were talking specifically about my previous report where I broke apart the anti-Israel activism movement, and I found over 150 pro-terrorist groups manufacturing that whole thing. And here it is. They said it's an existential threat, and they go on to say that could easily mean a quick death, referring to most of the groups that are involved in nonprofit stuff. And then they say, of those that survive, if we start stripping away the status based on what we did, they will suffer mass chaos. So they told us, we figured it out.
Wow. And your solution is to deny them 501c4 or 501c3 access to free money from the feds.
As a first step, but honestly, if we just did that, the impact would be overnight so massive, it would be bad for them. But then I have a million other ideas, all of which are easy.
Like what else? Can you give us a couple more ideas?
So if you want to, you can use RICO especially on the militant and organizational level, but also the Treasury Department has sanctioned groups as transnational criminal organizations. Mm-hmm. So then you just have a group like Capital Research Center and researchers like myself, who very often the federal authorities, by the way, actually haven't done the stitching together. So use activists. I have researchers, civilians on Twitter, on X, sending me great stuff all the time that I give to authorities, and they're like, yeah, we didn't know about this. Happens all the time. So we connect them to the foreign transnational criminal organizations that are sanctioned. You get them that way. Or you designate a foreign terrorist organization, and you do that through the State Department or the Treasury Department. You can sanction individuals or entities overseas for their terror connections. And there's many other ideas besides that. And I will also say this, even activism, this stuff, they're so blatantly bad that it's just a matter of getting a team of people that know the social media algorithms, people to research the donors, the advertisers. I'm confident that if we just had a critical mass of people to help distribute this stuff, to go to the donors to these groups, they would flee. Half of them don't know what they're funding. The other half are scared of the repercussions if they get found out,
Wow.
This is doable. It sounds big, but this is doable.
Wow. Good on you for exposing it, Ryan Mauro. Thank you so much. And I'll tweet it out and we'll excerpt this, and I really appreciate it. We're going to flip this for our Seattle Red show today as well. So thank you so much for everything that you've done. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Wow. That was amazing. Seamus Bruner is joining me. Hi, Seamus. How are you?
I am well, Victoria. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks so much for joining the Adult in the Room podcast. And, we're going to be on Seattle Red as well. And, Seamus is a director of research at the Government Accountability Institute. And he is a co-writer with Peter Schweitzer. And do you do the podcast too? Or is that what you do? Or
I contribute
you do everything?
Too.
Well, it's an excellent podcast. I really appreciate it. And thank you so much for coming on. We were just talking with Ryan Mauro about some of the tentacles and points of connectivity between the person who took out Charlie Kirk and the far, far left, the revolutionary queer machine or what have you. What can you tell us about that? Because I know you've looked into this.
Yeah, it's a great question. Everybody wants to know what is the connection, if any, to the armed queers of Salt Lake City. And for now, all we know is that the FBI is investigating this armed queers of Salt Lake City, and that they scrubbed all their social media the day that Charlie Kirk was assassinated. And so, if they were coordinating or planning in some way, I think they were caught by surprise. So that would lend credence to maybe innocence in the assassination itself. And yet, before the FBI started investigating them, they knew that there was some sort of proximity that led them to take down all of their social media and try to scrub their presence from the internet. So this armed queers group of Salt Lake City, what are they? They train with guns. It's led by a transgender individual named Ermaya Fanayan. This individual has worked with the DNC, the ACLU, a number of NGOs, very suspicious ones. One that the State Department under previous administrations was funding. The Marco Rubio State Department announced yesterday that it would cease all funding to this Utah Global Diplomacy Project, a kind of a World Economic Forum aligned group. So the State Department's not playing around here. The FBI is not playing around here. And these people are extremely radical. I mean, they're talking about overthrow and revolution of the United States. So whether or not they played some role in the Charlie Kirk assassination is beside the point. That these should be shut down. They are going down on these junkets, these trips to Cuba to train with communist, Marxist revolutionaries in Cuba. And this is funded by one of the greatest adversaries of the United States, a man named Neville Roy Singham, a CCP aligned agent, foreign agent, who, by the way, is now under investigation by the Oversight Committee, James Comer, and he sent a letter to Treasury to seize or freeze the assets. So big things are happening, and these groups are right in the middle of it.
You've written this book, Control Oligarchs. I love it. Exposing the billionaire class, their secret deals, and the globalist plot to dominate your life. And the tentacles are everywhere. Is there any way to get rid of these people or to be able to live free without them?
Yeah, well, so it's such an important book because it takes you really all the way back to the beginning of these giant NGOs, and it starts.
Can't wait to read it.
With the Rockefeller Foundation was really the prototype of how to control people's lives using the government in this unholy alliance with the NGO world. They have their Rockefeller Foundation, which is over 100 years old. Moves pretty quickly through to the present day, where Bill Gates learned a lot from them with his Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Both of them are purportedly involved in a lot of medical research, vaccines, etc., but also food research, patenting seeds and coming up with supposed cures for famine. But really what they're doing is taking control of medicine, taking control of the food supply, taking control of farming. That's, there's a whole chapter on the war on farmers and how Bill Gates is right in the middle of that. And then it moves really into the digital space and digital ID, controlling your life that way, central bank digital currencies, stuff that I would have thought a number of years ago were all kind of conspiracy theory land. but it's just totally bearing out every day.
Wow, the Trilateral Commission and all sorts of things. Turns out that, some of those people were rotten to the core and don't like us very much. So are you afraid for your life?
That's a good question. We're down in Florida. It's a concealed carry state, have lots of protection, tall fences and walls around our properties. No, I don't live in fear, but we are prepared.
So, we've just heard from Ryan about the different ways in which one could go about circumventing and or short-circuiting the money to these organizations. And you mentioned the Utah group that was sort of like the Davos group. Are there any other ways that could be used to short-circuit these organizations that you talk about?
Yeah, well, Ryan made a point there about how they can't be allowed enough time to set up a new operation, and the problem is that they do this all the time, and they've been doing it for a long time. Decades for the Soros network, decades even for the Arabella funding network, which a lot of people don't know about but should. And so they're very experienced with setting up a new entity. They've probably, they do have shell companies ready to go at a moment's notice. So going after the entities, I mean, it's critical in going after the funding sources. But really, you need to prosecute people. People need to go to jail. That's the only way that is going to fix any of this. Is people need to have the book thrown at them. So I applaud the Trump administration and what Stephen Miller said recently. I mean, and what Donald Trump said about using RICO. Any legal means necessary to bring justice and bring accountability on these people, because they know what they're doing. They know exactly what they're doing. They're funding at every level this ecosystem of violence and this ecosystem of radicalism, starting with preschools and trans and drag queen story hours, and then up through the elementary and middle and high schools with Bill Gates is heavily involved in education and things like social emotional learning, which is really DEI rebranded. What that does is it shatters a young child's sense of self and identity, tells them that they can be a furry or a transgender or anything they want to be, and separates and isolates and grooms them away from their family and traditional values. So that's really where Tyler Robinson begins, is in the classrooms. Then they are online in all of these extreme forums, and they're very nihilistic, pretty dark places to hang out. I can't pin it all on George Soros, of course, but then you've got all of the groups. So they find camaraderie in these radical left-wing groups and something to belong to, whether it's Antifa or 100 other organizations like it that want to destroy the United States, Armed Queers of Salt Lake City. And they go on, a funded junket down to Cuba, and they feel like they're part of something that's making a difference. Well, that something is seeking to overthrow the United States of America. That feels, seditious in some ways, treasonous in some ways. There's certainly foreign influence going on with people like Neville Roy Singham, and the CCP is backing these things. And so what the problem was, and Ryan touched on this, and he's absolutely right, it's too big for your average federal investigator to understand. They're usually looking at kind of like a small crime, lone wolf, lone gunman, or very, very small conspiracies. This is a massive one where there's a lot of players. They're extremely well funded. And it's just good to see the Trump administration taking it seriously and talking about things like RICO.
Yeah. I've always wondered why they hadn't done this before. One of the things I've noticed about Antifa, for example, and I imagine there's some tentacles here as well. Antifa had meetings. Antifa has a cannon. Antifa has a uniform. Antifa has membership. Antifa has songs and chants and oaths. They have all the things that identify them as an organized group, which should hold them to some standards against which we bring punishment.
Yeah, I completely agree. Where conservatives stumble, and it's because they're good people, is that there's a slippery slope. And what about when it gets used against us? And isn't this hypocrisy to wield power to crush our opponents? The problem is that most people on the right are not burning things down and vandalizing memorials. There wasn't a single George Floyd memorial vandalized in the way that these Charlie Kirk memorials have been vandalized. And so conservatives also believe strongly in the Constitution and the right to free speech, the right to bear arms. So, I'm not a gun grabber. I wouldn't even advocate for going and seizing the guns of these armed queers of Salt Lake City. But that doesn't mean that they're not breaking the law. There are many laws that are broken. There's a great book, 3 Felonies a Day.
Yes.
That says
we've had Harvey on a couple of times.
Yeah, Harvey. Yeah, he's great.
He's wonderful.
3 felonies a day. I mean, maybe not the high school and young people are committing the felonies, but guarantee you George Soros or his accountants or the people that work at the Open Society institutes have committed felonies of some kind, white collar crimes. They need the book thrown at them on whatever it may be, and they need to actually face justice. Now, why doesn't it happen? They're billionaires. They are able to fund the best attorneys, most of them former DOJ, FBI type attorneys. So they run circles around the government. And so it's a big problem. But what it takes is political will, and there hasn't been that before. And it appears that there may be some of that now.
It does make you just stunned to know that nobody else has previously, besides Trump 45, said, you know what, this is wrong, and we ought not engage in this and allow them to do this. The one thing that you talk about, these $1,000 an hour, $2,500 an hour attorneys at these white shoe firms, we started seeing this right after 9/11, and when we started, opening Gitmo, and all of a sudden Eric Holder's law firm is protecting and coming to the aid of terrorists that are doing time at Gitmo, and then he becomes the Attorney General of the United States. It's just like, wow, oh, what? And then all of a sudden, as a result of January 6th, the attorneys that are retained by the President of the United States are disbarred, disrobed, they are ruined. And it's such a, I don't know what to call it. It's wrong. Obviously, we're just sitting there going, well, John Eastman, what did he do? Gave someone advice. I mean, that should not be something that's weaponized, for crying out loud. You should be able to not pierce attorney-client privilege. But what did they do to the President of the United States? They did just that. All kinds of things. Just unfair. Just a two-tier justice system from the word go. It's just astonishing. So that's where I come from. Now, let me ask you. Do you see these groups? Every intelligence operative I've spoken with has said that January 6th was an information op. That was an operation. Okay. Do you go to the extent where you go, yeah, and here's where the money came from?
Yeah, well, one of the things that always rubbed me a little wrong about January 6th is there was virtually zero Antifa presence. They had been at every single rally in all 50 states, causing chaos, bird dogging, making a spectacle, being violent at every Trump rally. And then the biggest one ever, they decide not to be there. And so, no one's ever proved it. There were photos of buses and people, of them dressed up as MAGA supporters. I mean, you did actually have that one guy that CNN paid to get filmed from inside the Capitol.
Mm-hmm.
Name escapes me at the moment.
From Salt Lake City, by the way.
Yeah, from Salt
Lake City.
Point. That's a very interesting point there. In any case, as far as the money, I mean, the one thing with Antifa is it's definitely being paid in cash or like Venmos, and it's not coming from the accounts of the major organizations, which is what makes it so hard. You're right. It does look exactly like an organization, but there's no corporate entity. Excuse me. And so it makes it hard to seize the bank accounts. I mean, these are individuals acting sort of individually, and it's kind of hard to trace. Now, for a citizen, for journalists like myself and yourself, that's hard. For the FBI, it shouldn't be so hard. They have lots of tools to do this, and now there should be the political will. All we can do is hope that they actually do their jobs and use all of the powerful tools at their disposal.
Control oligarchs. The subtitle is Exposing the Billionaire Class, Their Secret Deals, and the Globalist Plot to Dominate Your Life. We'll make sure we get a picture of that in our post-production so that your book is shown far and wide. Really appreciate your time today. Seamus, Bruner, thank you so much for coming on the Adult in the Room podcast.
Well, thank you so much.
Take care. I look forward to being able to talk to you again. Appreciate it very much. All right. Man, oh man. That's like back-to-back guests that are saying pretty much similar things, just at different levels. One's international connection, and of course, Seamus is also an international connection, and it's pretty amazing. Pretty amazing. Well, it's time for us to say goodbye. We're a little late today. That's okay. Sometimes we've been late for like the last 3 times or 4 times the show. And I appreciate you tuning in today. Tune in also to Seattle Red this afternoon. I've tweeted out the different links that you can use to listen to the program. And I appreciate your listenership to the Adult in the Room podcast as well. Thank you so much. Remember, head up, heart out, and strive to be the adult in the room. Have a great day. Thank you so much for watching and listening to this episode of the Adult in the Room podcast. We do not take you for granted. We appreciate every single person who tunes in every week to listen and watch this program. We're here every Tuesday and Thursday, live streaming on Rumble, and then on every other podcast platform shortly thereafter when we can port it over and get it over there as soon as we can. All the shows can be found at victoriataft.com, where the censorship regime has been banned by me. Follow me on social media at these names: Victoria Taft, the Adult in the Room podcast, and the Victoria Taft Show. Send media inquiries, or any others for that matter, to victoria@victoriataft.com. And here's a big ask. Would you please subscribe, share, like, comment, recommend, and give this program a 5-star rating where you can? We really appreciate it. We do not take that for granted either. Follow my work at, you guessed it, victoriataft.com. PJ Media, I write tons over there. Flamingo Audiobooks, and of course the radio. I don't do this alone. This show is produced and engineered by Overall Media. 1A Cast is responsible for some of the Adult in the Room podcast's imaging. Logo design by Hageman Creative. The Adult in the Room podcast is produced at Flamingo Road Studios. All rights reserved.